8. So it was not the nice and relaxed morning I thought I was going to have. So stress management seems like a very good technique and a good topic to be speaking about. So we are doing a simultaneous broadcast this morning. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of that. We are doing a live show here for you in the room, and then we are broadcasting to the regions as well. And obviously, for those of you guys who've been in these webinars over the last probably 3 years now, we have been doing them all online. So for about 40 people right now, I think that's what we're at. They are online, and obviously you guys are here. So we're going to try to do both, and I will ask you to just bear with me because it's a bit of a technical learning curve for me as we kind of go through this. But I hope that we will have a very effective experience. I hope that everyone's hearing me in the regions as well. I'm going to try not to ignore you guys who are out there. There's a camera over there, so they're seeing me. They can't see you guys, but we will have a mic. There's a mic in the audience, so as much as possible, we're going to make it interactive as well, because that's part of the benefit of having you guys here. And that normally means bad news for those of you who are sitting back in the upper rows there. Normally what you're saying if you're sitting back there is, I don't really want to be involved. I'd like to watch, but perhaps not be too involved. We're going to try to get the mic as far back as possible just now and get you guys involved. We need to have a birthday song for Clinton on the mic as well, so any volunteers for that? Okay, so yeah, I think I've met most of you guys. Just a very brief introduction. If I haven't, maybe you've just seen me online and never actually seen me in the flesh. I don't know if I'm shorter or taller than you experienced online. My name is James. I'm a registered psychological counselor. I'm in private practice as well as consulting at Regent. I've got a practice in Morningside, and I do a lot of the student and staff psychological support here as well. So the idea for this year is to do 2 workshops a month going forward up until December. And we're going to cover some of the topics we covered over the last few years, a few new ones as well. We're always open to suggestions there as well. We thought it was a good idea to start with stress management for obvious reasons. Stress is such a big part of our lives, our modern lives, and sometimes just having a bit of a refresher on it, a bit of what it means. What are we talking about in terms of the physiology? What happens neurologically when we're stressed? What happens to our bodies when we're stressed? What happens psychologically, which is inside our minds when we're stressed? It can be helpful just to get a bit of that understanding, and then to speak just a little about, well, what can we do about it? How much control do we really have over these things? How much control do we have over our responses? Okay, so as usual, if there are any questions, please put your hands up. Again, I think that's the benefit of being in the same room, is that we can talk to each other a bit more naturally. And I'm going to try to keep an eye on comments from afar. Obviously, will you be aware of comments that we're getting, questions that we're getting? Do you see them there, or? Okay, if anything comes up, just bring it to my attention as well. That might be helpful. Thank you. Yeah, and don't wait for me to bring you in. If you think that anything you want to ask anything or contribute anything, please bring your voices to the forum. It's helpful to be hearing from different people as well. The interesting thing with psychology is, when I tell someone who I'm meeting for the first time what I do, they'll often say to me, "Oh, so you must be reading me right now. You must be analyzing what I'm thinking right now." But the truth is, in order for us to have relationships, in order for us to exist in social spaces, to have careers, to work with people, we all have to have a working understanding of what it means to be a human being, right? And what psychology is, and what it means to what we call the theory of mind. What is another person thinking? What's going on inside of their heads? How do I understand where another person is coming from? We're all doing that unconsciously all the time. And so I guess what I'm saying is we're all experts at these things in our own way, because living life with other people, it's on the job experience, if you will, in terms of just psychological training, I guess. So don't think that your voice doesn't matter. Your experiences and the things that you've learned in your life up to this point are valuable, and it's good to hear from you. Okay, so what is stress? That question has been sitting on the slide for a little while now. Any thoughts on that? Any definitions? You've had some time to think about it. Any answers to that? We won't pass the mic around just for these quick answers. I'll just repeat what you say for the people who aren't in the room. What is stress? Unless you have a long answer. If you have a long answer, ask for the mic. Yeah. Okay, so it's a personal opinion. Yeah. Thank you, Cindy. We are getting mic there, so everyone will be able to hear. Thank you.
Okay, so I personally don't believe in stress. So growing up, I'd always have this question, what is stress? So I can't wait to unravel this. So I believe in being worried. I believe in being anxious. I believe in a problem and a solution, but I'm still left with the question, what is stress? And that's just my opinion.
Okay, so just say a bit more on that. Did I get you right? You said you don't believe in stress growing up. Just unpack that a bit if you could.
Yeah, as I said, like you have a situation that will happen, right? And then you have your factors where you'll be feeling worried, you'll be feeling anxious, but what exactly is stress? Where does that fit in? What is the definition of it?
So do you see these things interchangeably, worry, anxiety, and stress? And you say, what is the difference between them? Or do you?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. Thank you. Can anybody unpack that a bit? What is stress then? If I was to pick you out right now and to say, could you give me an answer? How would that feel? Stressful. Okay. So you kind of have an idea of what it might be. What is that? Under pressure? Yeah. Pressure, indeed. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
It could be outside stresses, work,
Okay.
traveling in the traffic and trying to get here.
Yeah.
So all of those things
Can relate.
compact and it's all in your mind.
Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. You're saying it's something that's happening in your mind, and then it's that the feeling of being under a certain amount of pressure, and then that can affect you in different ways. It can affect you physiologically, and it can affect your body in different ways. Yeah. Agreed. Anybody else? Yes. The mic's coming to you. I'll wait. Thank you.
I just want to mention the fact that I've always heard this terminology being used, that stress is a silent killer.
Yes.
And I sort of agree with that, because lots of times people see me worried and they say, you're stressing. And I'll say, but what am I stressing about? Because I don't actually acknowledge that I could possibly be stressing.
Yeah.
So I think this is good for us to become aware of how we can be stressed.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think two things there. I think it's important to be aware of it, but to be aware of it in healthy ways, because we can be stressed about being stressed, right? That kind of adds a different layer. Oh my God, I'm so stressed, but and then we become stressed about that. But I think you're right. I think being aware of it is important, because it can be the water that we swim in. We're just so used to it, right? When was the last time you actually didn't feel some element of stress? You might not even be able to identify that, which means it's just for most of us, it's our basic state is to be feeling some level of stress. And maybe we only start to notice it when it actually starts to become really intense, and maybe we're not sleeping or getting headaches or that type of physiological expression. Okay.
Makes sense. I like what the first lady said, Michaela. I think it comes with second nature while you're growing up. It is part of life. It is something that you need to acknowledge. It is something that we need to be aware of. So, meaning that it's an anxiety that you have to know that it is there. Once you start growing up and you start having responsibilities, already stress has kicked in. So that's, and it can just be various stresses that you're also going to unpack while we're going forward. So I'm not going to be long, but yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So true. And I think probably, another way of saying that is there is no life without stress, and it goes back a long way as well. I have a 4-year-old right now, and I can assure you that he is stressed a lot of the time. It goes back as far as that. And I think once you become more aware of the world and more aware of yourself, then stress starts to become a part of your life. Okay, so if we're talking about stress, it's just your body's response to the something happening out there in the world. So it could be a real or imagined event, something that's happening out there, and then it's the way that we respond to it, and it's what we call our stress response. Our stress response, as we'll speak about in the next slide, is very different. It's very similar, I should say, to our trauma response. These are very kind of similar types of responses. So it's really just this psychological and physiological response that we have to some type of pressure out there in our environment. And it might not necessarily be something that's real. It might be something that we are anticipating or something that we're imagining. The idea that there's a lion in the bush is almost as scary as actually seeing the lion itself, even if the lion doesn't exist. You can kind of take that into your modern life. The idea that I'm going to get reprimanded for falling short of my performance index is the same as actually being reprimanded for it. That anticipation can be as stressful. So it doesn't have to actually be a real stressor, it can be one that we perceive. We think about the things that cause us stress, stressors. So these are the things that are out there in the world. It's different from the stress itself. The stress is the response. The stressor is the trigger. It's something that's out there, and it can be internal or external. So external stressor is I have a workshop that I'm presenting at 8:30, and Waze is telling me that my ETA is 8:35 and traffic is not moving. That's an external stressor, right? You think, okay, well, I'm going to be the last one to arrive in the auditorium. We're doing an outside broadcast as well. How are we going to figure that out? That's kind of related to that. The internal stress is what are people going to think? How unprofessional are they going to think of me? So these are my beliefs, the things that I'm imagining. I hate being late. This is my internal belief system. Right now, I'm kind of violating my own beliefs. That's causing stress. So you can see the difference between external and internal stresses. We don't have a lot of control over the external stresses, of course, but we have a fair amount of control over the internal, which is how do we think about things and what is our mindset towards stress as well. Mindset towards stress is such an important way of managing stress. When you do something that's important to you, you're going to feel stressed, and you can experience that stress as nervousness and fear, or you can experience that stress as excitement. And physiologically, that's really the same thing happening inside of your body. As you can, the butterflies, your mouth goes dry, maybe you start to shake, your voice quivers. That looks the same if you're feeling excited or you're feeling fearful. You have the power to reframe that and to tell yourself a story about that situation that can either kind of make it compound and you can get more fearful, or you can leverage the exciting part of it. This means something to me. This is something that I really wanted to do. It was really important to me, and I'm getting the opportunity to do it. That's a mindset towards stress. It doesn't change the actual thing that's causing you stress, but it changes your response to it. And eustress versus distress is an important way of thinking about stress as well. So distress is just the dysfunctional stress. Eustress is what we call kind of motivational, functional, hopeful stress. So if you acknowledge, such like Kaya, the point of view made, that there is no life without stress, then it's important also to say, well, we have to find a way of managing. We have to find a way of swimming in those waters, right? Because if we don't, we're just constantly going to be overwhelmed. How do we, is that me making that sound? Oh, somehow, okay, yeah. So how do we kind of take stress and make it into something that's motivational? This is the old cliche about studying, right? If you never felt stressed about an exam deadline coming up, you would never actually study for it. So this is why people kind of wait till the last moment, and the stress builds and builds and builds and builds. And then when the stress just becomes so much, it actually motivates you to act, motivates you to do what you need to do. So you can take that stress, which is to say, okay, well, there's something coming up. I'm quite fearful of failing it, or I'm fearful of it not going well. We can take that stress and turn it into action to say, okay, well, I'm not going to watch Netflix for another hour now. I'm actually going to do something. I'm going to, there's a marathon coming up in 2 months' time. I'm kind of fearful of how terrible that experience is going to be. So I'm going to wake up early tomorrow morning and go run. That's what we call eustress, which is a kind of positive, hopeful type of stress. And when you think about it this way, it takes a bit of pressure off as well to think, well, I have to just not be stressed all the time. To think about stress as the silent killer, right? I just can't feel stressed, because if I'm stressed, then it's going to be killing me. Say, well, there's a certain amount of stress that's actually quite helpful and quite exciting. And a life without stress be pretty boring. I think we'd find that pretty quickly. It's hard to imagine. But we have to take that into levels that are going to be functional and motivational, and they can get to a point quite quickly where the stress can start becoming demotivating, dysfunctioning, and then we get to the point where we actually start to burn out, and we can't really operate in the way that we would like to. Okay, so the fight or flight response. I'm sure you guys have heard of that. If you've been in these workshops as well, webinars, we've spoken about that. It comes up all the time. It comes up in terms of trauma. As well, the trauma response, it comes up in anxiety. This is our body's response to any type of threat that's out there. And our minds are amazing things. Our brains are amazing things. There's so much about them we actually still don't understand. That's psychology's worst kept secret, or psychiatry's worst kept secret, is we actually don't know a lot about our brains. It's all kind of, a lot of it's guesswork. Things like antidepressants, no one actually really knows why they're effective, but they seem to be effective, so we keep on giving them. That I think we'll figure out in time. But the point is, these are really complicated systems, you know, our brains. But when it comes to responding to threats, we don't really have a very complicated response. It's actually quite simple, which is we just respond with fear, we respond with adrenaline, we respond with cortisol. It's just to say that your body needs to respond to this right now. So when I say it's not complicated, I mean, it's not as though we have this vast array of neurological responses when we are threatened with something. So if we're threatened with someone who is, let's say, a home invasion, someone's coming to our house and they hold us at gunpoint, the things that's happening in our brain is the same things that are happening when you're late in traffic and you're trying to get to a workshop on time. It's just happening on a slightly different intensity, but the response is the same, which is that you're just getting a certain amount of adrenaline, you're getting a certain amount of cortisol, and your body is getting geared up to fight or flight or freeze, to stop. That can be quite functional as well. And this is why, again, you feel these very common symptoms. When you're feeling stressed, you have that kind of dry mouth, the racing heart, quick breathing, perspiration, tunnel vision as well. It's all there to make sure that you can respond as physically capably as possible. You need to be able to fight whatever's in front of you. You need to be able to run away from. But of course, you take that response now into a workplace, for example, or a marriage, and it can feel quite out of place, because what do? Right? I mean, well, you can't fight, you can't run, you shouldn't fight, you can't run away necessarily, you shouldn't do that either. Freezing happens, silent treatment is a thing. But at the end of the day, you have to find a way of kind of, still acting in rational ways and rational civilized situations with this very reptile response that's going on inside of our brain, very primitive response. And that's often where stress becomes overwhelming, because we kind of feel this physiological energy and the feeling of it, but we don't know what to do with it. So it looks a little bit something like this. This is the fight or flight response. You can just see how everything here is kind of geared up to make you act, to make you respond, to make you run away. To make you fight. And again, this is why we hear these amazing stories of people doing amazing things when they're under significant stress or traumatic situations, right? Being able to pick up someone twice your body weight, or run faster than you've ever run. Amazing acts of endurance. This is because your body is kind of geared up to DEFCON level 0. You really need to fight now. But if you think about that, maybe the analogy of a car is helpful. So now you're running on 7,000, 8,000 RPM, and you really kind of geared up for action. That's great when the stress is in front of you. But what happens when you're constantly being re-stressed? What happens when you're constantly being exposed to that stress? And what happens if it's happening on a day-to-day basis or multiple times a day? And then your body keeps on having that 8,000 RPM response. That becomes a problem. And that's when we start to have these longer term health challenges, because having that amount of cortisol, which is the stress response, in our blood system for long periods of time has been associated with all sorts of physical long-term complaints, high blood pressure and strokes and cardiac disease and that type of thing. And again, I'm not saying that to kind of frighten you, to get you stressed about stress, but to know, again, there's an optimal level of responding, of gearing our body's response to stress. If we think about the stages, the alarm stage of stress is just when something happens and now you're stressed. That's the initial fight or flight response, right? That's when your body's kind of working at its best. But again, because that doesn't always, it's not as though we just get stressed once and then it disappears. We're often in chronic stress. We're under stressful situations for months, maybe years at a time. And then we go into the resistance stage, which is our bodies are kind of, just coping with all of it. Because if you think about it, the way that our brains evolved, it would be punctuations of stress. This is what they say about war, right? It's just boring. War is incredibly boring until it's not. Very exciting for very short periods of time, and then it's just boring again. And I think our early lives were kind of like that as well. When we were, running around in the savannah, that for a lot of the time, nothing really happened. And then we'd have to have a stress response, and then you'd have to quickly respond, and then you'd survive, and then things would be fine, and then nothing would happen for maybe days. That's not really what's happening in our constant life, in our modern life. In our modern life, there's more of a constant kind of humdrum of stress, right? It's always finances, or stock orders coming up tomorrow. This person's birthday is coming up, and I don't know what to get them. I don't have money to get them. How do I get petrol? And all of these kind of constant things all the time. It's a very different type of experience. So we get into this place where our bodies are constantly in the stress response, and this is what we call the resistance stage. Over time, that becomes exhaustion, which is synonymous with burnout. And burnout looks a lot like depression, which is our bodies just go into inactivity. That's what depression is. It's just stopping everything. So stress is response. Depression is saying, whoa, slow it down. This isn't working anymore. And, people can take years and years to get there. Some people take decades to get there, depending on their own makeup, the stress that they face in their environment, the skills that they have. But eventually, if you're under this chronic stress that's not being managed, you are quite likely to experience some type of burnout. And that's not it's not any type of weakness. It's not a mysterious force that's happening. Again, it's just your brain saying you're running at a level that's actually not sustainable. Let's shut everything down. And again, it's quite a kind of blunt tool that it uses. It doesn't have a very sophisticated response. It just makes you hate everything. It makes you angry at everything. It makes you sad about everything. And that's just what depression is. It's just, I just don't feel like doing the things that I used to do anymore. It's a very good way of getting you to do nothing. But of course, it's painful and it's hard. And if you listen to it, what it's saying is something here needs to change. Whatever it is, something needs to change. It can't carry on the way that it's going right now. People often speak about depression as weakness, but actually, I think one of the hopeful quotes about it is to think about it as trying to be strong for too long, trying to do things, we're not acknowledging what's really going on for too long, and then eventually just break it down and very treatable. And it doesn't, again, I'm not trying to scare you into it, it doesn't have to lead to that. The point is to say, well, how do we kind of find adaptive ways of dealing with our stress before we get to that point? So on that note, what are your stress management tools? I'm going to ask just for some contributions there. What do you guys do? There are no wrong answers here. Exercise. How does that help you? Yeah. Okay. So it tires you out, and also it's a bit of you're using that as a bit of an escape from the things that are there. Yeah, good. Exercise. Anybody else? Look at the ocean. Tell me more about that. How does that work for you?
Morning. So one of the things that I used to do, still do, is go to the beach. If I'm not going to the end of the pier, then just on the promenade on the sand. Look at the ocean, look at the horizon.
Yeah.
Look as far away as possible and just forget about everything. So,
Okay.
I've felt that worked in the past, and it does work.
Yeah.
And exercise as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
Just whilst you have the mic still, I'm interested in that one. What do you think it is about looking at the horizon and looking as far away as possible? What do you think that does for you?
I think it's a way of clearing my mind
Yeah.
and letting go of everything that's on my mind,
Okay.
and basically like a reset.
Yeah.
That's what I feel it does for me. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Yeah, that's interesting. I think there's something about this perspective maybe as well. Just when I'm looking at looking something far away, maybe I'm getting a bit of a sense of perspective for where I am and where I am in the world. Because so often our stresses feel like and there's good reasons they feel this way, but they feel like they're the most important things. They're the biggest thing in the world right now. Is this thing that's keeping me up at night, right? And sometimes being able to step out a little bit of that can be helpful as well. Yeah, there's a mic coming your way, Jason.
I think venting to a friend and just having a conversation. Sometimes going through some of the things and you have to help each other through the situation.
Yeah. Okay, keep the mic. I've got follow-ups. Okay, so venting to a friend. Do you have friends that are able to help you with that?
There we go.
I think at the time, like you said, we have tunnel vision,
Yeah,
right? And you're
yeah.
only seeing one thing. And when you venture a friend, they give you a different perspective. They might help you to overcome the stressful situation.
Yeah,
Because it's pointless just stressing to yourself. Really, okay, that's very fast. It's just pointless. It's
Yeah.
not going to get you anywhere.
yeah. That's very true. Let me, yeah, do you want to add to that? Are you doing another one or? I have some questions on the support one first, if you don't mind.
Okay, sure.
I'll come to you next with this. Who here, when you're feeling very stressed or very upset about something, does speak to someone else? And yeah, I'm going to say that's 20%. Sound about right? Probably what I expected it to be. What's going on there, do you think? Why do you think so few people do it?
Stigma associated with things that they do.
Yeah,
A lot of people feel like I'm the only one in the situation, so they leave themselves when they're going through something. And I feel like past generations have made it very difficult for people to be more open and talk about things. I have a very different because I think that the more we talk about it, the more information we can share with each other. Maybe you don't have the same situation, but maybe the technique that you use to get over your situation can help somebody else.
yeah.
And the more you spread information, the better it is. And I think it also helps people get over that, oh, it's just me, how am I going to go through this? And gives you that support structure so that you can get over it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So I'm in agreement with you, but I'm going to play devil's advocate. I'm going to ask you a few questions. This is what people normally say. You can't trust people. You can't trust people to keep your secrets. If you tell someone, they're going to tell someone else. I've had this one experience where I tell them and this happened. What's your response to that?
I think it having the ability to know and confide in and it is a learning experience. There's many a times where I've confided in someone and they didn't give it that importance or that level of respect that I would have expected them to. Then I obviously just don't go to that person
Yeah.
again. You know, because I need when you want to confide in someone, you need to give people a level of maturity and also discretion. Because sometimes you're going to them with a personal issue. You don't want it to be too much. Yeah, it
Yeah.
causes you more anxiety about are they going to tell this person? I think just having a people that you can confide with and trust is very important.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get very shallow people that don't really see that. I don't know. I think we just come to it.
I think you're right. And I think the lesson, the takeaway you've taken there from disappointment and from a certain amount of betrayal is I'm not going to trust that person, which is different from saying I'm not going to trust any person.
Yes.
Right. I think sometimes we make these generalizations and we say, well, you know, this happened to me before, or maybe people have let me down early on in my life, and that's been part of my worldview now. That when I'm so sensitive to any type of betrayal, any type of disappointment, that as soon as I get let down, that's it. You know, don't trust anyone, which is a blunt tool, and it keeps us safe. It doesn't mean yeah, it's a security measure, but it's also so isolating. And the reason I'm especially interested in this coping mechanism is that it is such a hopeful one to be able to speak to people, but so few people do it. It's common to not want to speak to people. It's common to want to kind of keep these things to ourselves because it's scary to go out there and to confide and take the risk with another person. Right? And part of that, as you say, is because not everyone's good at it. Not everyone's actually able to carry what we have to give them. But you also, not everyone's capable of coming out and changing your tire on the side of the highway, right? So it's not as though you phone someone and they don't do it and you say, well, I'm never phoning anyone again. You say, well, maybe I'm not going to phone that person again, but I know this person is always very helpful with this thing. Being able to be flexible and creative about the way we use our support systems is so important as well. But it takes courage. We have these things called strategies of disconnection. So human beings crave connection, and that's part of what's going on right now in modern society. Is just that everyone's feeling so disconnected, right? The communities are falling apart. It's all online. Young people growing up in this environment are really struggling, and a lot of that is about disconnection. So we have this craving for connection, but we also have this deep fear of connection because there is no real connection without vulnerability. So, and there is no vulnerability without trust. So if I can't trust someone, I can never be vulnerable with them. And if I always think about vulnerability as something that's threatening or it's weakness on my part, I can never actually connect with other people. And so I'm disconnected from people. So we have this push and pull, this craving. I want to be seen. I want to be understood. I want to be heard. I want people to see my suffering as well. I don't want to have to carry this alone. And then we push people away and we keep them out. And that's a really lonely place to be, but super common, super common.
That having to be seen or heard is to selfish society because everybody's pushing to be seen and heard because they're not sharing the experience, they're not being with people. So that's what we need to do.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think the other thing as well, just on this before I go to the next point, question is we often kind of it can feel like there's an asymmetry in people's relationships, which means it's imbalanced, right? So if people have a problem, if anyone in my life has any problem, they know that they can come to me, right? But if I have a problem, well, I'm not going to burden another person with it. That wouldn't be fair. And you can see the double standard there, right? But that happens a lot as well, which is it's a lack of self-compassion in a way. It's a lack of self-kindness to say, well, I'm treating myself by different standards than I treat other people. I expect other people I have the grace to give them a space to speak to me, but I don't give myself the same grace to use those spaces in my life as well. And I'm not suggesting these are easy things to do. They take a lot of courage because there's discomfort, and if there's discomfort and vulnerability, but there's rewards as well. So if we tie this back to stress again, you can see how if you're kind of carrying so much, and you're also, stress is a fear response at the end of the day. So you're kind of carrying all these fears, all these worries about life, and then you're also worried about letting anyone else in or anyone else knowing how you're feeling. That just compounds the stress, it compounds the isolation, and then we lose perspective. We lose perspective, I don't know, it starts to feel like it's just overwhelming.
Belief systems, that's where stress comes from.
Yeah.
And if you're harder on yourself, it's going to give you more possibilities for you to stress.
Yeah.
But then you also cannot have a belief system. You need to find that balance so that you can have that equivalence. Otherwise, it's just going to be bone chaos. So
Yeah.
opposite sides.
Yeah, it's true. The beliefs we have are so instrumental there. Beliefs like perfectionism, I can never fail, I can never be seen to be imperfect, I can never let people down. That just compounds it. Those are the internal stresses that are. Thank you, guys. I'll move on. Vashni, you had a.
So my coping mechanism is prayer.
Yeah.
And pills.
Prayer and pills.
So when I
In
say
that order.
pills, anything that's natural,
Yeah.
that will be able to calm you down. Because as you get older, as they were alluding to before, when you're younger, you don't have the stresses, but as you're growing older and you become mature and the stress just gets more and more, whether it be family, personal, emotional, work,
Yeah.
traveling to work, whatever it is, there's always power in prayer.
Yeah. You have a similar commute to me, don't you? Yeah. Did you get stuck in traffic this morning?
No, I used Waze.
Yes, I did.
So download it. I took the M19.
Let me down. Stick with the mic if you could. Spirituality, prayer, how does that help you?
So I think we all believe in a higher power, or most of us do. And when you pray, you just you're speaking to that higher power. You're asking for inner strength. It's a mental belief. It's your belief system. It's who you go to for everything.
Yeah.
Well, personally, that's what I do.
Yeah.
And I think we all have some kind of way that we believe in that higher power, and we ask for direction. We ask for strength. We ask for keeping us safe, whatever that means. But I think we're all praying to the same things and we're asking the same things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's hopeful. I think there's a number of things there. I think it's about this feeling like we're connected to something bigger than ourselves. That can be really helpful psychologically as well. Because it can be quite scary, living and trying to figure it all out. This feeling like it's not just me. There's something more here. That can be helpful. And I think it's also a case of surrendering to an extent. And there's many ways you can get here, but it's about surrendering surrendering control of the things that you're not in control of. which is honestly one of the top stress management techniques is learning when we're worrying about things that are actually outside of our control. And you know, that prayer is a way of getting there, because we're just surrendering. We're saying, actually, I'm leaving this. This is not for me. I'll do what I can, but I'm letting go of the parts that I have no control over. And I think that's quite helpful as well. I won't follow up on the pills. You said it was natural, so we'll leave it at that. Thank you. Anybody else?
Stress to. Sorry, can you hear me?
It's your birthday. You're allowed to be loud.
Okay. My stress management tools, number 1 is food. Number 2 is push-ups. Thank you.
Do they combat each other a bit? There's a question online. Yeah. Could you read it on the mic? Do you mind giving the mic to Vincent? Okay. Could you read it out on the mic? Oh, okay. Someone's going to speak. Okay. Someone's coming in. Where are they? Who are they? And where are they?
Hi, everyone. My name is Nosi. I'm speaking from Joburg campus.
Thank you, Nosi.
And my technique for stress management is different kinds of tea. So I have a range of tea at home where it's chai tea, I've got the green tea, I've got the rooibos, and I also have the chamomile tea, which is very good with actually relaxing yourself and also help you with sleep if you suffer from things like insomnia.
Yeah.
So I've decided that I should go that routine, and that helped me escape a lot of things like antidepressants or stuff that was prescribed for me for stress management and other things.
Yeah.
Tea actually is very good, and if you drink it over a sound like duduk music, meditation, that's how I start my day, with duduk music, and that's how I end my day as well. So I also think that it plays a role what energies you channel in your body when you start your day, so that you can actually be able to overcome whatever that will come. So your foundation is very important before you leave your house and deal with traffic and everything at work. You first need to make sure your foundation is good. Channel your energies with good music. That's very spiritual. And then when you end your day, whatever you went through, do not go to bed mad because Nosi said this or this one said that, or you were in a road rage. Make sure that you listen to that good music. Have your nice cup of chamomile tea next to your bed and
Yeah.
sip on that and go to bed. And it works wonders.
Lovely.
Meditation and different kinds of teas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you, Nosi. There's so many good things there as well. I think you speak about antidepressants. I think there are a lot of natural antidepressants as well. A lot of things we do are, okay, I've got another question afterwards. Let me comment on this one and I'll go to it. Exercise is a natural antidepressant as well, okay, at this point. But there are lots of things we can do as well. And I think what's so great about that tea as a stress management tool is it kind of speaks to this idea of self-care, right? And we often think about self-care as the big things, what we call macro self-care. So I've got to go to the Philippines for a month, right, to look after myself. That's macro self-care. And then if we kind of set up self-care like that, we're doomed to fail, right? Because how often can we really, I know I can't do that very often. So then it becomes something that's unobtainable. It's just this idea that, well, I know I need to look after myself, but where do I find the time? And where's the money for doing these things? So it's not really practical. I've got all of these responsibilities. But you can shift that focus to micro self-care, which is, well, maybe as important is just creating those moments in our day where we have some type of ritual and something that's kind of grounding and something that gives us just little amounts of pleasure. That's hugely powerful. And the process of making tea or making coffee, there's something ritualistic in that as well. And you're contributing to a mindful, intentional routine as well. But you're saying, I'm not kind of rolling out of bed and kids' food and running and rushing in the car and going, and that's a stressful way to live. It's a normal way to live. We all do it, but it's stressful. Whereas if you can, maybe it means getting up half an hour earlier and you're kind of mindful about the way you spend your time. That can be a really helpful start. So I think there's some great points there. Yeah, we had another question. Sorry.
Morning, James. Are you able to hear me?
Good morning. Welcome. Sorry,
Morning.
who is it?
Morning, it's Nadim.
Oh, hi, Nadim.
Hi, everybody.
Where are
Yeah.
you this morning, Nadeem?
In Cape Town, at home, in my office at home, James.
Okay, wonderful. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just listening to all the strategies that everybody is putting forward with regards to how they're dealing with stress. For me, the problem is that those are temporary fixes. The problem is that the cause of that stress is still going to be there after you go to the beach or go for a run to exercise or do whatever it is that you want to do to overcome that stress. But the cause of it is still going to be there after. So for me, I think that one of the ways in which we can manage that stress is acceptance. Let's take, for example, the issue of traffic. And you're sitting in traffic, there's nothing else that you can do. You learn to accept the fact that you're stuck in this traffic and it's going to take you longer than usual. Turn up the music, listen to a podcast, do something to bide your time. But I think facing the stress, if it's something else that's causing the stress, is to accept that that stress is there and see how you're going to deal with it. So if it's somebody, perhaps somebody who's causing you that stress, is to confront the person.
Yeah.
So in other words, confronting the cause of the stress and learning to manage that cause, I think will help to overcome the kind of stress that you feel.
Yeah.
Thanks, James.
Thank you so much, Nadeem. I think there's a lot of wisdom there as well. The point when it comes to stress management is you can make this hierarchy of what do you do? And the first thing you can ask yourself is, to Nadeem's point, can I actually do anything about this? Maybe I can. Often people will come to see me and they'll be like, I'm feeling this way about this person in my life. And I'll say, well, have you spoken to him about it? And they'll say, well, not yet. I'm afraid of how they're going to react, or, they don't normally listen to me. The first thing you can do is say, well, how do I actually get to the stress? What can I control? Because if that stressor if the stressor can get resolved, you have one less thing to worry about, right? Often it's uncomfortable. Often it takes some type of, some act of courage, or you have to do something a bit different. But if you can resolve the thing that's causing you stress, well, that's first prize. So definitely, I think that's the first question that's worth asking when you are dealing with any type of stress in your life. What can I actually do about it? What is in my control here? And sometimes what's in my control is not necessarily this is something that's out there. I can't actually change it. Maybe I've chosen it even. But I can choose what I do with it. I can choose how I think about it. I can choose my mindset. And part of that is the things like acceptance. Yeah, accepting what we can't control. If I'm in bumper to bumper traffic, I'm not going anywhere. That feeling of urgency doesn't make me drive faster. And that's where things like meditation and mindfulness can actually come in, because I can just start to become aware of what that feeling of urgency is like, and I can start to actually, observe it, as opposed to feeling like it's part of me. It is who I am. I am not urgency. I'm just experiencing a sense of urgency right now, and I can allow that to pass as well. And I can choose a different way of managing it. So yeah, acceptance is it's what we call a cognitive emotional regulation strategy. So it's just a fancy way of saying the way that we think can down-regulate our feelings. Our thoughts affect our feelings. So acceptance is very helpful. But the key with acceptance, don't get it wrong. Acceptance is not about accepting what we can control. That's passivity. That's when we're kind of giving up the steering wheel of our life and we're saying, well, someone else can drive. Acceptance is saying there are things I can't control. I'm letting go of those. But I need to own what I can control. I need to own what's in my power. Yes, it was in the hand. Yeah.
I was going to say prayer and meditation, but Prabhashini beat me to it.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about something else. I call it self-caused stress,
Yeah.
where we put certain standards for ourselves, And I learned over a period of time that you must just let go. In most Indian homes, I'm talking for the homes I grew up in, food was curry and rice. And so if I wasn't able to put curry and rice on the table for supper, I was a failure, so to say, and it used to be, it becomes a pressure now on anybody in their home that if you can't put curry and rice on the table, then you're not doing what you're supposed to do as a mom or whatever it is. I just learned that my kids don't like curry and rice. So I'm not going to stress myself about cooking curry and rice. I'm just giving that as an example.
Yeah.
And so there's many little things like that in the home, especially, that you can just remove, you know, from, and don't stress about it.
Yeah.
You know, I know when I didn't have a domestic help at one stage, ooh, what was I going to do the next day? How am I going to cope? And I spent the whole night stressing about.
Yeah.
Only to realize that just really do what you can.
Yeah.
You know, do the little you can or the most you can, and things will work out.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
I've experienced this too.
Yeah, wonderful. I think that's so good. And you speak about this self-induced stress. Just in a technical note, and I know we are approaching the last few minutes of this. I'm kind of going to transition this into a Q&A as well. So if any other questions come up, do ask. Speaking about self-induced stress, it makes me think about this differentiation I have about necessary and unnecessary suffering, which is having the mindset of life has a certain amount of suffering as part of it. It's quite a helpful mindset to have. Then we're not surprised by the hardships. Life can be hard at times. It can be wonderfully meaningful and rewarding, beautiful, all these good things, but also it's hard, right? And often the good things come through the hard things. So knowing that, well, we are going to suffer. That's part of it. That doesn't mean we have to suffer all the time. And it definitely doesn't mean we have to suffer unnecessarily. And that's the distinction. Where we kind of maybe contributing to our own suffering through maybe overstressing, as you put it, about certain things. And part of that is flexibility, the ability to be flexible about certain things. That we can have these rigid expectations that we can internalize, we can make for ourselves, and kind of hold ourselves ransom, hold ourselves, ambushed to these really kind of rigid beliefs and expectations we have for ourselves. Or we can stop and we can ask, do I really believe this? Is it really necessary? Is there another way of doing it? And that gives us freedom, I think, to feel different ways as well, and not suffer unnecessarily. There was another point at the back there.
Okay, the way I manage my stress is accepting the things that I cannot change and learn to live with them. But on that process, we are doing I am doing those temporal things where you take a walk, you listen to the music, you call someone, you vent to that person. But on the process or the goal that I want to achieve is to learn to manage my life the way it is, accept it the way it is. That's all. And open that room of disappointment, because in our lives, there is a lot of disappointment. Your kids disappoint you, your family disappoint you, your friend disappoint you. So you must always open that room of disappointment and expect anything from anyone.
Yeah, so well said. And I would add another one. You say, your friends disappoint you, your family disappoints you. I would add one more to that, which is say we disappoint other people as well. And we often don't remember that. We're human as well, which means we're not the only person in the world who's not disappointing people in our lives. And sometimes we're not aware that we're doing it. And the point of that is not to kind of judge or shame, but rather to say we can understand that these are human, that they're human phenomena. Is that it's possible to be perfect all the time. It's possible to live up to the expectations. The thing with expectations is it's sometimes helpful to tell the difference between what's a reasonable and what's a realistic expectation. So we can have a reasonable expectation of how a person might behave. I would expect you to, treat me with a certain amount of respect. I would expect you, maybe not to tackle me when you see me walking by. These are reasonable expectations. But over time, I get to learn from a certain person what's a realistic expectation, right? And sometimes we have these broad realistic expectations of people generally. People need to live up to a certain standard, and it's not realistic. Sometimes our expectations are reasonable, which is think, I expect when I tell someone something that they're not going to suddenly tell everybody else what I told them. That's a reasonable expectation. But with this person, is it really realistic? It seems not to be realistic, because every time I told them something, I do seek to tell everyone else. That gap between what's reasonable and realistic tells you what kind of relationship you can have with that person as well. The bigger that gap is between what's reasonable and what's realistic, the kind of lower quality relationship we're able to have with them, because we're not able to trust them as much. So again, I think the point which you made really well is we get to choose what our expectations are. And it's not to say we should have no expectations. That would be disappointing in its own way. It would be unhealthy in its own way. But knowing where can we kind of calibrate them optimally is helpful. Great, thank you. Yes.
Thanks, James. I think everybody that has spoken, we're taking a lot of good pointers I think it's actually working. Decisions like this are actually working. And again, it hasn't been the same. We used to only see you online, and we can see the impact that it does when we actually face to face. Already, that is a tool. Already, that is a tool. Just I'm just gonna be trying to be quick. We're running out of time. Last week, I was going home after work on Wednesday, 4-hour drive. There are tools that are there, but a point that Mr. Ali made, the root cause, if it's now where we actually know we need to be aware of things that we need to accept. And you see these discussions right here, they are helping me internally because I was so stressed. After work, I need to be at home. It's a 4-hour straight drive. And guess what? There was a tool. Incidentally, I was listening to how AKA passed away when they were interrogated. There's a podcast, one of his bodyguards were being interviewed. It was a 2-hour. And guess what? When I passed Pietermaritzburg, I found myself, I was past Greytown listening to that podcast at night. After 10 o'clock, I'm still on the road. So these are tools, but at times the tools, they are escaping tools. For example, some of us, there are things we won't talk about, like maybe the pills or whatever, even pleasure. There's a lot of different pleasures that they're escape routes. Again, that can start being a problem. Again, we need to talk about these things and being aware of. I know Dr. Asfat will go at after work. He will go and just drive somewhere and watch soccer. Something that's very different from him. He will just park his car somewhere and I'll put it colloquial, lighties will be playing on the. You just stop. No. Listen, this is why I'm saying these things help when we speak like this. You watch the young people playing soccer. It's now what it does. It's a small distraction in that moment. It's a reset tool. So there's a lot of tools, but we must also be aware of which tools we are using and the good and the bad of it as well. So James, thank you and colleagues for all the comments and the contribution. This was really informative exercise. Thank you, colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree. I think it is good to be in the same room, and I hope for those of you who are connecting remotely, you're also getting a sense of the a little bit more interaction as well. It's been great to get your comments. Yeah, the point about tools is to have as many as possible, really. It's often stress becomes overwhelming when we only have one or two and we kind of rigidly locked into, when I'm stressed, I kind of work harder. I just, push through or I sleep. Whatever it is. If we only have one or two responses, that's when we often get overwhelmed by the stress. So if we have a toolbox that's full, then we can be flexible and creative depending on what's stressing us. We can say, well, right now maybe this specific approach wouldn't work, but I can do something else. When I get stressed, I normally want to go away for the weekend, but I have so many responsibilities at home, I can't do that. So what do? Maybe it's something more like micro self-care, or maybe I just go for a run. Again, exercise so helpful when it comes to stress because you're dealing with that physiological response as well, the adrenaline in your body, but also it clears your mind, it gives you problem-solving capabilities that you wouldn't have had beforehand. So you get to think about the stress in a different way as well. And that's really helpful. And also most of the time when you're running or you're doing any type of exercise, your phone is at home. So you're not kind of getting lost in the screen, which is a very good way of not being present. And I think that kind of takes you to the point about it's not, right now, understandably, you guys are mostly sharing the adaptive stress management techniques. No one's really saying, well, I go out there and I drink 3 bottles of wine. I understand why you're not sharing that, but I think it's important to acknowledge these things exist, right? They're there. We find ways of not being present because being present is painful a lot of the time. When we're feeling like our lives are very stressful, we do whatever we can to not feel something. That might be TikTok, or it might be sleeping, or it might be some type of substance as well. This is why people fall into dependence, because it's a way of just removing themselves from the pain of that current moment. And so the challenge when it comes to managing stress, again, is to acknowledge, well, stress is normal. The point is not to make sure that you have no stress, but it's also to kind of create a life where the stress is at a level where we can do it day on day. And it's going to be, it's going to do this, right? There's going to be times where of a life where this is an especially stressful time right now, lots of deadlines. We can get through that. I can get through this week. But we have to think long term as well. What's sustainable here? What are the patterns that I need to be putting in my life? How do I need to structure my life? What changes do I need to make? What does it need to look like? So it's a life that I don't have to be escaping from. And if we don't have to escape from it, we're much more likely to reach for the so-called adaptive, healthy coping mechanisms, because we can be a bit more present. Speaking to someone about the way that you feel is a way of being very present, because then you're kind of engaging directly with that psychological experience of discomfort. You could understand perhaps if that feels too much, why you might not want to do that. You just push it away and watch TV for an hour or whatever your particular strategy is. So I think we're almost at time. We're a bit over time. Any more questions, comments before we wrap it up? In many ways, this is a to be continued, because so many of the topics we're going to continue revisiting this year are going to be ways of managing stress as well. Stress management is a broad church, as it were. Any comments or questions for me? Okay, nothing from afar. Guys, thank you very much. Thank you so much for joining. And thank you to Spongiseni and Vincent for helping set up, especially in my absence. I think we ran smoothly, so that's a testament to you guys. Thank you very much. And we'll pick it up again in 2 weeks' time. We'll send out the actual time. We're just trying to find availability. We'll send it up shortly. Okay. Hey.